Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. It's Wallbuilders Live, and we're tackling the day's hottest topics on policy, faith, and the culture, always from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. This is a great opportunity for you to take that perspective and share it with others. One of the things Wallbuilders does so well is teach truth. We go back into history, we look into the Constitution, we look into the Bible, and we get the right perspective on all the major issues of the day, and certainly at a time like this in our nation's history, where we have veered way off course from those constitutional jurisdictions, it is an important time for us to restore those things, to come back to those things, and remind ourselves what's so important about these conservative values that produce freedom and prosperity, and what we as citizens must do to participate in that. Here at Wallbuilders Live, we have David Barton, America's premier historian and our founder at Wallbuilders. My name is Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach, and we want to bring you these truths, and we need your help to do that. If you'd visit wallbuilderslive.com today, it's a great place to make a contribution and invest in freedom. You can also find out more there about some of those hot issues of the day. In fact, if you're curious about the constitutionality of quarantines, we've got a whole video series right there on the website at wallbuilderslive.com. All right, guys, we're going to have Senator Jim DeMint with us later in the program, and right now we're here with Jonathan Ritchie and David Barton. And guys, Senator DeMint's going to be talking to us about how to preserve conservative principles and how to push back on socialism. It is pretty shocking when you think about it that the Democrat candidate for president was almost going to be a socialist, an avowed socialist, willing to admit they're a socialist, has praised communist dictators. You'd think a person like that, might get 1% of a major party vote in America, but Bernie Sanders is, nearly got the nomination, and you see stadiums filled. So what does that say about where our education system has gone in terms of teaching whether socialism or free enterprise is best?
Well, you go back to a statement Jesus made where he said in Luke 6:40, every student, when he's fully trained, will be like his teacher. You go back to a quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln where he said the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And you take the current stats that say that 75% of students in college right now support socialism, open, full-blown socialism. That's the Bernie kind of socialism. 69% of millennials and 41% of Americans. How did we get there? Well, education is where this comes from. Now, that means that if professors took my kids in a direction, then I didn't do a good job of grounding my kids in the principles and the views. And that's what we're finding right now. A lot of parents just assumed that education was reinforcing what they believed. Well, no, you can't make that assumption. You have to look at education now as being extremely hostile to what you believe, everything. And if you do not equip your kids to be able to stand on their own merits, on the apologetics of what you believe and what you've taught them, then they're going to be in trouble when they get there. So you have socialism taking over. Now, on the other side of that is what we would say is conservative political philosophy. And, when you look at conservatives as a movement, when did they become a movement? What are they and what do they believe and et cetera? There was this thing of conservatives is trying to conserve something. Well, what are we trying to conserve? Generally, we're trying to conserve basic principles that have proven across time to be the best for freedom and the best for liberty and the best for personal prosperity. And so those principles that we try to conserve are not the principles that socialism advocates. A socialist is all into groups. Everyone is treated equal in groups because you have the group of the elites and you have the group of the people. So we, the leaders, will tell you what you people need to know. So even though they say socialism brings full equality, you can't find a socialist country in the world where there's equality between leaders and people. I mean, it doesn't happen.
What about Venezuela?
Yeah, thank you very much. Point made. Name some other good socialist countries where you have equality.
The USSR, of course.
Yes, that's right. Russia.
I mean, why don't we just go honeymoon there, right, with Bernie Sanders?
Oh, yeah. But that's the problem, is there's no logic. And so I think really, and Jonathan, you can speak to this because you deal with it every summer at the LTP program. What we really lack doing is we do not instill apologetics in people today.
Absolutely.
They don't know why they believe what they believe. And that's the thing we see every summer with young people.
100%. I mean, growing up and going to college, when I went to college, I was still in university when the 2016 election happening. So, right, Bernie Sanders and a huge socialist push there. And I remember the conversations that I would have with my classmates. And we're sitting around, and right, I went to a fairly conservative university, and I was in the honors college. And there was maybe 2 or 3 people who really understood what socialism actually meant. I think there was an amazing study that was done not too long ago where it said the top 2, right, definitions that young people gave for socialism was like social media and sharing, which, right, would to God.
So if we use those definitions, Rick, I think you're a socialist. You're into sharing and you're into social media, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm a full-blown socialist.
I guess it depends on how you define it. I guess definitions do mean things.
So if you're against socialism, it means you just don't care because you don't share, right? And boom, checkmate. There it is. That's my political philosophy for the next 50 years of my life.
Well, what I've always seen in the summer that I enjoy watching you and Tim, particularly with young people, is in the first couple of days, you really don't care so much what they believe. You take what they believe and show them they don't know why they believe it. And so whether they're for socialism or against it, you just start asking them questions about their beliefs, and they cannot defend their own beliefs, which is what opens them up to be able to teach them apologetics. Is you don't even know why you believe what you believe. You've got all these beliefs. Where'd you get them? Why do you support or hold those beliefs?
Yeah, and I know we mentioned it a lot, but asking questions in a non-aggressive way, right? Not a, gotcha question. It's a, well, just tell me a little bit more about that. If you just ask that question like 3 times to a young person, more times than not, you'll find out that they really haven't thought through a lot of the talking points that they've heard on the television or, even on a podcast. So going in and digging deeper into what actually people mean, what do you believe, and then what do we preserve from the past generations?
One of the folks who's been really good at helping know what we want to preserve has been Senator Jim DeMint. Jim, of course, was in U.S. Senate for a while. He was in the House for a while, then U.S. Senate for a while, and then he was head of Heritage for a while, and now has a great conservative group. And he's had a couple of books out recently that really kind of cover what we're talking about is, keeping America from socialism and knowing what to keep or what to conserve. As conservatives, what are we trying to conserve? What are we trying to keep? And so since this is something that is so much a part of what the debate is now with young people and universities and education and where we're headed, we thought it would be really good to get Jim on to talk about it.
Yeah, because you got to pick your battles. You got to know what's worth fighting for and what needs to be preserved. And Jim does a fantastic job of that. Senator Jim DeMint, our special guest when we come back on Wallbuilders Live. Hey friends, Rick Green here, and I want to invite you to join us live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon for a crash course on history and the Constitution. We're going to take you to some incredible places in American history and bring that history to life, tell you the story of America, rediscover the roots of what made America great in the first place. And we're going to have live conversations and questions with it. All the different folks that starred in Chasing American Legends, they're going to join us throughout the series. David Barton will be there live on one of our programs, Tim Barton on another one. We've got Dr. Alveda King coming in, Brad Stein. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. You can sign up right now at patriotacademy.com. It is entirely free if you are a member of a state homeschool association anywhere in the country. And if not, you need to join anyway. Right now, everybody's schooling from home, whether it's yourself and your whole family or maybe just you by yourself. Either way, get signed up. And if you're not a member of an association, we still have ways for you to sign up. But we'd love to have you join us for this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. It's going to be a great time of history and government and learning what we can do to be citizens. It'll bring history to life. It's going to be fun and entertaining, and it's going to be live, and we expect to see you there. Check it out at patriotacademy.com. Welcome back to Wallbuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. Our good friend, former Senator Jim DeMint, is with us. Senator, always a pleasure to have you, sir. Thanks for some time today.
Rick, it's great to be with you, and it's an interesting time to be watching what's going on in Washington.
Well, you guys are doing incredible work at the Conservative Partnership Institute. You just had such a great impact on the conservative movement. I want to talk a little bit about where we are, and you've made a great defense of capitalism and pointed out the failures of socialism in your book last year, Knowing What to Keep. I guess my first question for you is, as a major leader in the conservative movement for the last several decades, when the State of the Union happened this year and Rush Limbaugh was given that Medal of Freedom, all I could think about was what a pivotal moment in the conservative movement. This guy being honored in that moment on that national stage says that our movement has really accomplished a lot. Were you thinking the same thing?
Well, I was. I think one of the first voices I ever heard that called themselves conservative was Rush Limbaugh on the radio before I ever considered getting into politics. So he probably inspired this millions of Americans to understand what this country is all about. What are those things that we want to keep, as we talk about in the book, and to see him honored like that was meaningful to all of us. I mean, certainly the battle is ongoing, and there are a lot of forces in our culture and politics pushing in the wrong direction. But I do feel like that the movement is coming together in a very positive way across the country, and I know I'm a small part of that. But there are a lot of great new leaders emerging, and I have to say, Rick, talk radio has from Rush to what you do, and so what so many others do, has been the one source that we can all turn to find out what's really going on.
Well, it's been interesting to watch even the last 3 years with a totally different, I mean, opposite ends of the spectrum for a president, and how that has changed the direction of the whole country. And in your book, Knowing What to Keep, you lay out, really, it's almost like a conservative manifesto, if I could say that, in terms of really knowing what we believe, knowing what's worth fighting for, picking those battles, and looking at victory moving forward. So I really want to encourage people to get that book. Now, that's the one you did, I guess, back in August of last year. You've got a new one coming out this year. Can we get it? I know it's not out yet or anything, but can you give us a sneak peek on it?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked about it. About 10 years ago, I wrote a book titled Saving Freedom. The subtitle was We Can Stop America's Slide Towards Socialism. At the time, even though it did make the bestsellers list, a lot of folks just thought that was hyperbole, that socialism was nothing like a threat in America. But I think we all see now that there are far too many people taking it seriously. And even if they don't call it socialism, a lot of what the Democrats are talking about in terms of policy are very government-centric economics and cultural pressures. So I have rewritten and reintroducing the book under the title of Saving America from Socialism. And it's going to come out July the 4th. Hopefully folks can pre-order it. But it really goes back through what are the basics of our prosperity, what are the free market concepts that really work. And it's not theory. We use a lot of examples, and I try to use a lot of simple stories that folks like me can kind of understand what it means. And I had the privilege, let's say, of starting a small business and keeping it for 15 years. And I really came to see that our whole culture, our whole society, the whole American way is built from the ground up, and that certainly includes economics. But as conservatives, Rick, we've got to know what we believe. We've got to know what works.
Yeah.
And it's not about political ideology. It's really much bigger than that. It's about everything that matters, that's worth keeping, that we understand what it is and how to keep it. And as you and I know, and I think many Americans know, that begins with our faith, that what we think about God determines what we think about everything else. And that's one of the reasons that dictators try to root out religion from, Karl Marx calling it the opium of the people, to what you see in China today. And so we have to understand as believers and as Americans how all of the ideas of Judeo-Christian values are integrated into the things that really make our country great.
Well, we have to not only know it, but these basic ideas of faith in God and God's role in a society, to free market economics versus socialism. We used to think we didn't have to defend those things, but you knew 10 years ago when you wrote that book, this stuff has to be defended, and it has to be, probably the wrong word, but it has to be sold. It has to be marketed. You have to teach each generation, hey, here's why free enterprise is better than socialism, and you got to do that. And we haven't done that with our civics in America for so long that the need for what you're communicating is greater than ever, and we see people hungry for it. The last president was a socialist but didn't use the term, and like you said, It was in the policies more than the rhetoric. These candidates now, they're calling themselves socialist, and so it's just that will progressively get worse on the left unless we do a good job of, again, selling, marketing to the American people and saying, here's why free enterprise is better than socialism, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing from the Trump administration. Now, and from my perspective, he's kind of an unlikely salesman here of our ideas. I didn't expect that, even though we did a lot of work to try to get the right policies in his hands. But I think what Trump has shown through just being bullheaded and kicking down doors is that our ideas actually work if you use them, and they not only work, you can sell them politically. All the Romney people in their post-analysis said unless Republicans agree on this giant amnesty, we'll never win another election. And Trump came in and said, we need border security, we don't need illegals, and everyone said he was going to lose. But he's proven that if you speak the truth on things, that Americans will come with you. So, again, we're not there yet, and the country's pretty equally divided, which is kind of hard to believe if you look at what's happened with our economy, how Trump's policies have helped minorities and women, that even though the truth is right in their face, you still have about half of Americans who don't see it as something that's good for our country. So we're not anywhere close to bringing this back to home base. But,
Right.
Rick, I am encouraged, just as I work with hundreds of conservative groups around the country, that more and more are communicating in a positive, forward-looking way. And we've got more and more young people now who are listening, even though I guess our woke culture is pretty oppressive. And I find a lot of young people are afraid to even ask questions. But a lot of this is going to have to come from our churches. And one of the things we need to do is convince Christian leaders around the country to weave in our stewardship as Americans as we look
Yes.
at our government and our culture, that we have to integrate our faith into all areas of our life, not to use the force of government to push our ideas, but to make sure that government protects our ability to live out our faith in all areas of our lives.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's even more important than ever, maybe even to be strategic about how we do these things. It's what I love about you and your the things you've done over the years. Even with Trump, I mean, it's a great example of this. Is that we had our some of our friends that were never Trumpers, and we weren't excited about him in the primary, of course, and then of course once he got the nomination, we all got behind him, and then when he got in. You were so instrumental in coming alongside and helping, like you said, and putting the good information there and helping to steward in many ways this administration. I just want to thank you for not being one of those guys that says we're not ever working with him and all of some people in the conservative movement did. And so thank you for being a part of that, because I think that's been a big part of why this administration has done so much good. And that strategy, that's really what we're talking about moving forward. You guys are even doing a great job of that on the technological side. And off air, we talked about this briefly. Give us a little teaser about this, and then we'll do another program about it. But y'all are really targeting the social media outlet for influencing the culture.
We are. I mean, unless we learn to communicate better as conservatives, we're not going to win the culture, and we have to win the culture before we win politics. But at the Conservative Partnership, our job is to unify, build, unite, and equip conservatives all around the country. And one of the areas that has been missing is on the digital social media front. And so we've taken a couple of the best people that have been working in the White House the last couple of years and brought them in to teach young people on the Hill and in conservative groups how to use social media in a way that can help us break through to all people across the country, but especially young people. So many people get their news there. And Trump has shown us, again, I use the verse for myself and certainly for Donald Trump, that God uses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. I mean, he's proved a lot of things that weren't used, can be used to circumvent a very liberal, dishonest press. And so what we're doing is we're going to have class after class of a lot of young communication people to get them in a place where they can use this tool in a positive way. And so we're starting that right now. We're going to do it all the way up to the election. We're also working on helping to get good staff for the second term of the Trump administration, as well as members of Congress, because I found that staff is really well over half of what makes a good member of Congress. So we've got a lot of work to do. Most people are just working on trying to elect the right people. What we're doing, Rick, is get ready when they get there, is to make sure that they can move the ball across the goal line.
It's vitally important. The website for folks to learn more and to support, get on their email list, make donations at conservativepartnership.org. That's conservativepartnership.org. Senator Jim DeMint, Brother, so appreciative of you. Keep up the great work. Look forward to having you back again soon. And also the book, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. Encourage people to get that and study it as well. We'll have you back again soon, sir.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks so much.
Stay with us. You're listening to Wallbuilders Live. Hey, friends, it's Rick Green from Wallbuilders Live, and I have had so many requests about what in the world can we be studying at home right now. You know, I got the kids at home. They're normally in school, or if you homeschool, you're looking for additional material. One Room Schoolhouse. It is a great new series Wallbuilders is putting out where you literally get a tour of the Wallbuilders Library as Tim Barton and Jonathan Ritchie bring history to life. There's a couple of resources on this. You can go to YouTube and search for Wallbuilders and look for One Room Schoolhouse. You can go to our Facebook page and get it right there on Facebook as we do it live each Monday and sometimes additional days from there. And then you can also just go to wallbuilders.com. Scroll down to the bottom and we'll be posting the videos as they come out. This is such a great way to learn and a great way for you to share with others. Gather the family around, watch the One Room Schoolhouse, and learn some great history. It'll be vitally important to restoring our nation and bringing back these principles that made America great in the first place. Check it out, One Room Schoolhouse at wallbuilders.com. We're back here on Wallbuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Special thanks to former Senator Jim DeMint, and Conservative Partnership Institute is something you ought to check out. We'll have a link today at our wallbuilderslive.com website. We're back with David Barton and Jonathan Ritchie. Guys, most of our listeners would maybe label themselves conservatives. I don't know that labels are always such a good idea, but certainly if they consider themselves pro-family, pro-life, pro-religious freedom, that typically means they're a conservative, and they can be engaged in saving these things, but they've got to get educated. These books that Jim was talking about is a great way to do that, and then supporting good causes out there.
I think Jim made a key statement, at least it jumped off to me as key of thinking. Why would you support unborn life? Why would you support any of the things conservatives do? He said, what we think about God determines what we think about everything else, which is why dictators and tyrants always try to root out God. Because our beliefs as conservatives come from the fact that God is the one who gives rights, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We believe conservative principles because they generally reflect what God's teachings are. And so even conservatives who may not be religious people, they still embrace those religious teachings. Whereas on the other hand, if you look at where progressive, and I'm going to use Democrats now because, a few years ago I couldn't talk about Democrats in this term because there were still some really conservative Democrats. Not in Congress now. I mean, just this morning I was talking to a U.S. Senator, and he was lamenting the fact that he really doesn't have any moderate Democrats to work with in the Senate anymore. There's nobody that can pick up. We were talking about even having a prayer proclamation by the president, and he didn't know of a single Democrat he could go to get help with a national prayer proclamation.
Wow.
And so you go back to a couple months ago, or I guess now 6 months ago, where the Democrats passed a national resolution praising the largest religious constituency within the Democrat Party. And that religious constituency was atheist and non-religious people. And that's their largest religious constituency. So when you look at where social progressives are and what they're doing, whether it be with life or economics or anything that conservatives don't believe, they really have become the party of we're against what God stands for.
Wow.
And for the last 5 presidential elections, the greatest indicator of whether someone will vote Democrat or Republican is not their race, it's not their social standing, it's not their economic income. The greatest indicator for the last 5 presidential elections has been how often you go to church. The more often you go to church, the more likely you are to vote Republican. The less often you go to church, the more likely you are to vote Democrat. And I think Jim put his finger on the whole conservative movement. Again, that doesn't mean all conservatives are God people, but all conservatives are embracing ideas that are taught by the Bible and that are taught by God that He laid down for all people.
Absolutely. I think that hits on, one of the central things that people my age misunderstand about the conservative movement is that the conservative movement is really the moral movement, right? It's the movement of compassion. It's the movement of giving, of charity. I mean,
That's right.
There was a lot of conversation during the early stages of the Democratic primary on charitable contributions, right? And you find out that these socialist guys like, Beto or Sanders don't give anything in charity, which seems kind of contradictory to their professed statement of what they believe. But that's something that I think people my age don't understand is that what does it mean to be conservative? Well, it's actually the moral side of things, the one that represents God, the one that represents charity and love.
Yeah, great point.
Well, now, why would they give their money, even though they're millionaires, when, Jonathan, they can just take your money and give it away? It's so much easier and, feels so much better on their part. And,
That's a twisted view of I feel better about myself when I make you give. That's
Wow.
crazy.
I mean, when you put it that way.
It's all about you, brother. They're trying to help you, feel better about yourself by taking your money. Yeah, so kind. Not exactly a model that will last very long or work very well. We've seen it fail every time it's ever been tried in any nation at any time in history. Socialism does not work. And we've, of course, seen the negative results of socialism during this whole COVID crackdown. That's what caused socialism in medicine, is what caused so many of the backlogs with the testing and everything else. And this desire for government to save us has led to these overzealous crackdowns and these governors that think they have to control everyone's life and everyone's movement. So we need to move away from socialism, and what a great time to be reminded of the values that we want to keep and the things we need to do to preserve those values. In fact, it's a great time for you to help the conservative movement enter this new phase that we're in by getting your friends and family educated on these things. Share the Wallbuilders programs with them. Go to our website, wallbuilderslive.com today, and you can share the links to the programs. It's also a great place to make a contribution. Invest in freedom by investing in Wallbuilders Live, and then become a Constitution coach and help share this information and actually teach it. It's not hard to do. All you got to do is hit play, and you'll use the videos that David and I did in the library there at Wallbuilders and also at Independence Hall. Check that out at constitutioncoach.com and get signed up. You can make a difference if you're willing to spend a little bit of time, if you're willing to invest a little bit of energy in these things. You can do your part as a citizen to help restore America's constitutional republic. Thanks for listening today to Wallbuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever